What if I told you the man in these photos is 81 years old? And no, it's not because he just looks good for his age. His name is Rafael Vera, and his approach to aging makes us rethink what happens to our bodies as we age. Because perhaps the real secret isn't how to look younger, but how to stay physically fit for as long as possible. What does he do differently? Why does he continue to train at such an age? And most importantly, what parts of his approach can the average person use, even if they've never done bodybuilding? Today, we'll explore several of Rafael Vera's principles that may prove far more important than any youth pill. So watch this video until the end. It'll be interesting and useful. So let's get started. The first important aspect of Rafael Vera's story is regular strength training. At 81, he continues to bodybuild, focusing especially on his upper body. This is important not only for appearance reasons. With age, a person naturally loses muscle mass and strength, and this process gradually affects more than just the ability to lift weights. Weak muscles mean it becomes more difficult for a person to get out of a chair, climb stairs, carry bags, maintain balance, and perform ordinary everyday tasks. Therefore, muscle strength in old age is essentially a reserve of independence. And here there is a fundamental difference between training for appearance and training for longevity. If your goal is simply to look bigger, you can constantly chase size and records. But if your goal is to remain physically independent for as long as possible, it is much more important to maintain strength, coordination, mobility, and the ability to perform normal everyday movements. This is why strength training is becoming one of the most practical tools for healthy aging. Rafael Vera doesn't try to turn every workout into a competition. He gradually increases the weights he uses. This seems obvious, but this is where many people make a mistake. They see that they can lift 10 kilograms today and decide that they absolutely must lift 20 next workout. As a result, technique deteriorates, recovery becomes more difficult, and the risk of injury increases. In the long term, this approach can lead to a person stopping training altogether. For longevity, a different strategy is much more beneficial. Progress slowly but steadily. If an exercise becomes slightly easier, you can add a small amount of weight, a rep, or a set depending on the program and the state of your body. At 20, recovery can allow you to experiment much more boldly. At 60, 70, or 80, the cost of error can be significantly higher. Therefore, progress must be manageable. And here comes one of Rafael Vera's most important principles. He doesn't compare himself to younger athletes. This may seem like a psychological triviality, but in fact, it's a very sensible approach to training at any age. Your body doesn't have to match someone else's age, their results, or their athletic achievements. If you're 60, your goal isn't necessarily to train like a 25-year-old. Your goal is to become a stronger, more functional version of yourself. This is especially important because comparison can cause you to ignore your own body's signals. A young athlete can perform a certain amount of work and recover quickly. If an older person tries to replicate that volume at any cost, the result could be chronic fatigue or injury. Therefore, it's much more useful to compare your current performance with your own past results. And here we come to a principle that many underestimate: the ability to recover. You can talk all you want about training, but muscles and other body systems adapt not during the exercise itself, but during the recovery period afterward. Training provides the body with a stimulus, and recovery allows it to respond to that stimulus. Therefore, for someone who wants to train for decades, Recovery is not the opposite of training, but an integral part of it. If after a tough workout you constantly feel drained, your sleep quality deteriorates, your usual workout suddenly becomes overwhelming, and your desire to train disappears, this isn't a reason to simply pull yourself together. It's a reason to reassess the volume and intensity of your workouts. Rafael Vera has another interesting feature. He films his workouts. At first glance, this is simply content, but it has practical implications. When someone regularly records their workouts on video, they get the opportunity to look at themselves from a different perspective. You can see technique, range of motion, body position, and changes that aren't always noticeable day after day. For the average person, videos can also serve as a kind of fitness diary. You don't necessarily have to post them online. You can record yourself performing a few basic exercises every few weeks and compare your technique. This allows you to notice changes much more objectively than just by feeling, especially when it comes to long-term progress. But the most important thing in Rafael Vera's story isn't a specific exercise or even a specific weight. It's his attitude toward aging. It's easy to start viewing a certain age as a signal. Well, that's it. I can't do it anymore. You can't train. You can't build muscle. You can't get stronger. You can't start anything new. But age alone doesn't explain the full range of a person's physical capabilities. Yes, recovery does change with age. The speed of adaptation changes, and the importance of proper technique, sleep, and load management increases. But this doesn't mean that after a certain age, a person should give up physical activity. On the contrary, it's precisely then that it becomes especially important to maintain what helps a person remain independent. That's why Rafael Vera's story is useful not as a train like him instruction, but as a reminder of a long-term strategy. You don't need to become the strongest person in the gym. You don't need to compete with 20-year-olds. You don't need to set records every time. Your task is much more interesting: to ensure that your body remains your ally for as long as possible. Friends, what do you think of this man? Write your opinion in the comments. If this video was useful to you, then please like it and share the link with those who might find it particularly useful. We also recommend watching this video that's currently appearing on your screen.